It wasn't the lipstick on his collar or unexplained late nights that gave him away. It was carelessness, a single moment of complacency after months of meticulous deception. The text message lit up his phone screen as it sat unattended on our kitchen counter. "Miss you already? Last night was incredible." My husband, Michael, who'd guarded his phone like a vault for months, had finally slipped up. The name above the message made my blood run cold. Ellie. In 15 years of marriage, through raising 2 children, and building what I thought was an unshakable life together, I'd never once heard him mention anyone named Ellie. Before we would jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My hands trembled as I set down my mug. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. But something inside me, some primal instinct, compelled me to pick up his phone. In that moment, it was like my body moved without permission from my brain. One swipe, and I had access to everything. Michael had never set up a passcode. He didn't need to. The unspoken trust between us meant I'd never checked his phone before. Until now. The message thread with Ellie went back 6 months. 6 months of intimate conversations, inside jokes, plans to meet. Photos I wish I could unsee. My stomach clenched as I scrolled through evidence of a life my husband had been living parallel to ours. Secret dinners during late meetings, weekend work conferences that were actually romantic getaways. The betrayal was methodical, calculated, and thorough. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. In a panic, I placed the phone exactly as I'd found it and retreated to the living room, my mind racing. What should I do? Confront him immediately? Gather more evidence? Leave? My entire world had just imploded, yet somehow I had to act normal. When he came downstairs, I had to pretend I didn't know my husband was in love with another woman. When Michael entered the kitchen, I studied him with new eyes. How had I missed it? The subtle changes in his appearance over the past few months, the new cologne, the sudden interest in fitness, the trendy clothes. He'd even changed his hairstyle. All the classic signs were there, and I'd been blind to them. Or perhaps I'd chosen not to see. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing the top of my head casually before grabbing his travel mug. "I've got that client meeting in the city today, so I'll probably be home late. Don't wait up." Another lie. According to the messages I'd just read, he was meeting Ellie for dinner at some upscale restaurant downtown. My throat tightened. "Sure," I managed to say. "Have a good day." He looked at me curiously. "You okay? You seem off." "Just tired," I lied. Was this how easily deception came to him now? The casual falsehoods? The double life? Had I unknowingly learned from the master? "Get some rest then," he said, grabbing his phone and car keys. "Love you." The door closed behind him, and I collapsed onto the kitchen floor, silent sobs racking my body. 15 years, 2 children, a home we'd built together, memories we'd created, a future we'd planned, all of it now tainted by his betrayal. After the initial shock wore off, rage took its place. I wasn't some meek housewife who would turn a blind eye. I deserved better. Our children deserved better. But I needed to be smart about this. Knowledge was power, and right now, I had the upper hand. Michael didn't know that I knew, and I intended to use that to my advantage. I called in sick to work that day, the first time I'd done so in over 3 years. Then I drove to our bank. I needed to know exactly what our financial situation looked like. Had he been spending our money on her? Were there credit card statements I hadn't seen? I requested copies of our joint accounts for the past 6 months, and what I discovered made me dizzy. Hundreds of dollars spent at jewelry stores. Hotel charges in cities where he claimed to be attending conferences. Cash withdrawals that never made it home. Next, I contacted a lawyer, a friend of a friend who specialized in divorce. I needed to know my options. What about the house? Our retirement accounts? Custody of our teenagers? I took meticulous notes during our consultation, my teacher's training kicking in even as my personal life fell apart. You have options, the lawyer Janet told me compassionately. But my advice, don't confront him yet. Document everything. Screenshots of messages if you can get them, financial records, evidence of his whereabouts. The more prepared you are, the better position you'll be in, I nodded numbly. This was my new reality, gathering evidence against the man I'd once trusted with my whole heart. That evening, I picked up our kids from their after-school activities with a forced smile. Ethan, 16, barely looked up from his phone when I asked about his day. Lily, 14, chatted animatedly about her upcoming science fair project. Neither of them noticed anything amiss with their mother, which was both a relief and heartbreaking. How would they react when they discovered their father's betrayal? Would they blame me? Think I hadn't been enough for him? Michael texted at 8 p.m. Meeting running late. Don't wait up. I stared at those words, knowing exactly where he was and who he was with. For a fleeting moment, I considered driving downtown, walking into that restaurant and causing a scene. The look on his face would almost be worth it. But Janet's advice echoed in my head. Don't show your hand. Not yet. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I created a fake social media account and searched for Ellie. It didn't take long to find her. A beautiful blonde woman in her early 30s, at least 10 years younger than me. Her profile was filled with sophisticated cocktails, yoga poses on exotic beaches, and motivational quotes about living your truth. I felt physically ill scrolling through images of the woman my husband had chosen over his family. Then I saw it, a photo from 3 weeks ago. Michael wasn't in the frame, but I recognized our vacation home's distinctive deck railing in the background. He had taken her to our sanctuary, the lakeside cottage we'd saved years to purchase, the place where we renewed our vows on our 10th anniversary. That violation felt even more intimate than the physical affair. I shut down the laptop and poured myself a generous glass of wine. My mind drifted to the early days of our relationship, the passionate college romance, the simple courthouse wedding when we discovered I was pregnant with Ethan, the lean years when Michael was starting his business and I was teaching full-time while raising our son. We'd survived so much together: financial struggles, my father's death, his mother's battle with cancer. When had we become strangers? When had I stopped being enough for him? The sound of the garage door opening at midnight startled me from my thoughts. I quickly rinsed my wine glass and hurried upstairs, not trusting myself to face him without revealing what I knew. I pretended to be asleep when he entered our bedroom, holding my breath as he moved around in the dark. The scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to him as he slipped into bed beside me. I fought the urge to recoil. Sleep evaded me that night as I lay beside the stranger I called my husband, plotting my next move. By morning, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront Michael. Not yet. First, I needed to secure my future and that of our children. I would gather evidence, consult with financial advisors, and prepare for independence. And then, when the time was right, I would confront him with incontrovertible proof of his betrayal. But even the best-laid plans sometimes go awry. The following week passed in a haze of pretense. I maintained our normal routine: family dinners, helping with homework, weekend grocery shopping, all while secretly documenting Michael's deceptions. I purchased a small lockbox to store the evidence I was collecting and hid it in my classroom at school, the one place I knew he would never go. I also opened my own bank account and began transferring small amounts from our joint savings. Nothing that would raise alarms, but enough to create an emergency fund if I needed to leave suddenly. I updated my resume and reached out to old colleagues about potential opportunities. The teacher in me was methodically preparing for a future I'd never imagined. Meanwhile, Michael seemed oblivious to my investigations. In fact, he became more attentive than he'd been in months. He brought home flowers one evening, just because. He suggested a weekend getaway for our upcoming anniversary. He even initiated intimacy one night, which I reluctantly participated in, feeling like a stranger in my own body. It was during this bizarre period of renewed attention that I made my first mistake. Michael had mentioned needing his passport for an upcoming business trip to Montreal. I knew from his messages with Ellie that this was actually a romantic weekend they'd planned. While searching for his passport in his home office, I discovered a small velvet box tucked in the back of his desk drawer. Inside was a diamond bracelet, far more expensive than anything he'd given me in years. The gift receipt was still inside, dated just 3 days earlier. This wasn't some trinket. It was a significant investment. My hand shook as I replaced it exactly as I'd found it. The physical evidence of his affection for her hit me harder than any message I'd read. That night at dinner, when Michael casually mentioned his Montreal trip, something in me snapped. "Who is Ellie?" I asked quietly, as our children stared at their plates. The color drained from Michael's face. "What?" "Ellie," I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. "The woman you've been sleeping with for the past 6 months. The one you're taking to Montreal next weekend. The one who's getting that diamond bracelet hidden in your desk." Ethan's fork clattered against his plate. Lily's eyes widened in shock. "I don't know what you're talking about," Michael stammered, but his expression had already confirmed everything. "Kids, please go to your rooms," I said, not taking my eyes off my husband. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice cracking. "Now please," I insisted. After they reluctantly left, an eerie silence fell over the dining room. It was Michael who broke it. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to know you've been living a double life. Long enough to consult a divorce attorney. Long enough to realize our entire marriage has been a lie." He flinched at the word divorce, but didn't deny my accusations. Instead, he did what so many caught spouses do. He tried to shift the blame. "You've been so distant," he said. "Always. Focused on the kids. On your job. When was the last time you actually saw me? Really saw me?" His attempt to gaslight me only fueled my resolve. "Don't you dare!" I hissed. "Don't you dare make this my fault. You made a choice, Michael. Every secret text, every lie about working late, every night in her bed. Those were choices you made." "It's not that simple," he argued, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "Ellie and we connected on a level that you and I haven't in years." Each word was a dagger, but I refused to show how deeply they wounded me. "Is she worth it?" I asked. "Is she worth losing your family over?" He didn't answer immediately, which was perhaps the most honest response he could give. The Michael I thought I knew would have immediately said no, would have begged for forgiveness, promised to end the affair. This hesitation told me everything I needed to know about where his heart truly lay. "I never meant to hurt you," he finally said, the banality of the statement almost comical in its inadequacy. "Well, that's a relief," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure Ethan and Lily will find great comfort in knowing their father didn't intentionally destroy their family." As if on cue, a sob echoed from the hallway. Lily had been listening. The realization that our children were now part of this ugly reality broke something in me. I'd failed to protect them from their father's selfishness. "I want you out of this house tonight," I said, rising from the table. "You can get a hotel room, or maybe Ellie has space for you. I don't care, but you will not sleep under this roof." "You can't just kick me out?" he protested. "This is my house too." "Watch me," I replied, a cold determination settling over me. "Either you leave voluntarily, or I tell Ethan and Lily every sordid detail of your affair, including the photos you exchanged that I've saved copies of. Your choice. The threat worked. Within an hour, Michael had packed a bag and left, promising to call the kids tomorrow to explain. As if there was any explanation that could soften this blow. After he left, I found both children in Ethan's room. Lily was curled up on her brother's bed, tears streaming down her face. Ethan sat beside her, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. "Is Dad really having an affair?" he asked as I entered. I nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm so sorry you had to find out like this. I was trying to protect you both." "How long have you known?" Ethan's question echoed his father's. "About a week," I admitted. "I was gathering information, talking to a lawyer. I wanted to have a plan before confronting him. So, what happens now?" Lily's small voice broke my heart. What indeed? In the space of a week, our family had been shattered. The future I'd planned had evaporated. Yet looking at my children, these amazing human beings that Michael and I had created together, I knew I had to be strong. For them, if not for myself. "Now we take it one day at a time," I told them, gathering them both into my arms. "This isn't your fault, none of it. Your father made choices that have hurt us all, but we're going to get through this together." That night, after the kids had finally fallen asleep, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "I'm sorry. Can we talk tomorrow? Figure this out?" Figure what out? I wondered. How to divide? Our assets? How to schedule custody? How he could maintain relationships with both his wife and his mistress? There was nothing to figure out. The moment I saw that text message from Ellie, our marriage was over. I just hadn't accepted it yet. Instead of responding, I blocked his number. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, explaining to my principal why I needed personal leave, finding a therapist for the kids, dealing with the inevitable questions from family and friends. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for the marriage I thought I had and the future that would never be. Little did I know, Michael's deception ran far deeper than I had imagined, and Ellie wasn't the only secret he'd been keeping. The morning after Michael left, reality crashed down on me like a physical weight. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at the coffee mug he'd left behind, still half full and cold. The kids had gone to school reluctantly, their eyes hollow with questions I couldn't fully answer. The house felt emptier than it ever had, despite having contained only 4 people before. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since dawn, Michael trying to reach me through every possible channel since I'd blocked his number. Emails, social media messages, even reaching out through mutual friends. I ignored them all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was his sister Caroline who finally broke through my self-imposed isolation, appearing at my doorstep unannounced with a determined expression. "You look terrible," she said bluntly when I opened the door. "Thanks," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. Caroline and I had always been close, closer than I was with my own sister, if I'm being honest. She'd been the one who introduced me to Michael in college. Now her face was etched with a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Michael called me," she said, settling at the kitchen table without waiting for an invitation. "He's a mess." "Good." The coldness in my voice surprised. Even me. Caroline studied me carefully. "He says you think he's having an affair." "I don't think. I know." I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots I'd taken of some of the messages between Michael and Ellie. Her face paled as she scrolled through them. "Oh, God," she whispered. "I had no idea. I swear, Rachel, if I'd known—" "You didn't," I assured her. "None of us did. He was too careful." "What are you going to do?" she asked, handing back my phone. I'd been asking myself the same question since the moment I discovered the truth. "File for divorce," I said, the words still strange, on my tongue despite my resolve. "I've already talked to a lawyer." Caroline nodded slowly. "I'll support whatever you decide. You know that, right?" Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Her words unleashed something in me. Perhaps the first genuine emotion beyond anger and shock that I'd allowed myself to feel. Tears came suddenly and violently. Caroline moved to my side, wrapping her arms around me as I sobbed against her shoulder. "I just don't understand," I managed between gasps. 15 years, Caro, 2 children. Was I not enough? Was our life together so unbearable that he needed to create a whole separate existence? "This isn't about you," she said firmly. "This is about Michael and his choices, his failings." "But no," she interrupted. "Don't you dare blame yourself. My brother made a series of deliberate decisions that led to this moment. He lied. He cheated. He betrayed his family. That's on him, not you." After Caroline left, promising to help with the kids whenever needed, I found myself drawn to the home office Michael and I shared. He'd taken his laptop when he left, but his desktop computer remained. We'd always known each other's passwords, another element of trust I'd never thought to question until now. I hesitated only briefly before logging in. This wasn't about invading his privacy anymore. This was about understanding the extent of his betrayal before I confronted it legally. What I found shattered any lingering hope that this might somehow be salvageable. Michael's deception went far beyond Ellie. Financial records revealed a second. Apartment rented in the city for the past 8 months, a secret residence I knew nothing about. Credit card statements showed purchases for women's clothing and jewelry that had never made their way to me. There were travel itineraries for trips he'd taken without my knowledge, always disguised as business travel. Most devastating were the photos, not just of Ellie, but of other women too. Not as intimate or numerous, but evidence nonetheless that Ellie wasn't his first indiscretion. She was simply the current one. I printed everything, adding it to my growing file of evidence. My hands trembled, but not from sadness anymore. Pure, white-hot rage coursed through me. The betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single affair. It was systematic, calculated. Years of deception so intricate it was almost impressive. My phone rang, displaying Janet the lawyer's number. "Rachel," she said when I answered. "I've just received a call from Michael's attorney." My stomach dropped. "Already? That was fast." "He wants to meet. Apparently Michael is claiming you've locked him out of his home illegally and taken his children from him." I laughed bitterly. "I told him to leave. He chose to go." "These are just opening tactics," Janet assured me. "But I need to know. Is there anything else I should be aware of? Anything that might come up?" I thought of the evidence I'd just uncovered. "Yes, a lot, actually. I think you should come over. Today, if possible." When Janet arrived, she listened silently as I laid out everything I'd discovered. The apartment, the multiple women, the financial deceptions. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight widening of her eyes at certain revelations. "This changes our approach," she said finally. Michael was clearly planning for a potential separation. That apartment, the separate finances, he was creating an exit strategy. "For how long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Janet hesitated. "Based on these records? Years, potentially. Years." While I'd been planning family vacations and attending parent-teacher conferences, my husband had been methodically constructing a parallel life. The betrayal extended so far back that I questioned every memory, every moment I'd thought we'd been happy. "There's something else," Janet said carefully. "These financial records show significant transfers to an offshore account, given his line of work." Michael was an investment advisor. He handled other people's money for a living. "You think he's been embezzling from clients?" I finished for her. I think we need to proceed very carefully, she replied. This could extend beyond family court. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Michael betrayed our family, but he might have committed financial crimes that could lead to criminal charges. Our children could lose their father, not just to divorce, but potentially to imprisonment. As if summoned by my thoughts, the front door opened, and Ethan and Lily arrived home from school. I quickly gathered the documents spread across the dining table, shoving them back into folders before they could see. "Kids, this is Ms. Janet," I said with forced cheerfulness. "She's helping me with some paperwork. Why don't you take your things upstairs while we finish up?" Lily nodded silently, her eyes red and puffy. Ethan stood his ground. "Is she your divorce lawyer?" he asked bluntly. Janet and I exchanged glances. "Yes," I admitted. "She's helping me figure out what happens next." "Has Dad called you?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "He's tried," I said. "I'm not ready to talk to him yet." "He called me," my son said. "Asked me to convince you to let him come home. Said it was all a misunderstanding." The anger that flashed through me must have shown on my face, because Janet placed a warning hand on my arm. Warning hand. "Your father shouldn't be putting you in that position," I said as calmly as I could manage. "This is between adults." "But it affects us too," Ethan argued. "Don't we get any say in what happens to our family?" The raw pain in his voice broke my heart. At 16, he was caught in that difficult space between childhood and adulthood, old enough to understand what was happening but powerless to change it. "You will always be our priority," I promised him. "Both of you. Whatever happens between your father and me, that won't change." After Janet left with copies of all my evidence, I called my parents. They lived 3 hours away and had always adored Michael, their perfect son-in-law who remembered every birthday and anniversary, who called just to check in, who seemed to worship their daughter. The conversation was excruciating. "There must be some mistake," my mother insisted. "Michael wouldn't do this." "I've seen the evidence, Mom. There's no mistake." "People go through rough patches," she persisted. "Your father and I—" "This isn't a rough patch," I interrupted. "He's been living a double life for years. Multiple women, secret apartments, hidden bank accounts." The silence on the other end of the line stretched into uncomfortable territory. "I need you to support me on this," I finally said. "The kids need your support too." My father's voice replaced my mother's. "We're coming up this weekend," he said firmly. "You shouldn't be alone right now." That night, as I lay awake in our bed, the bed Michael and I had shared for 15 years, my phone dinged with a text from an unknown number. My heart stuttered. When I opened it, "I know we've never met, but I think we need to talk. This is Ellie." I stared at the screen, 1,000 responses running through my mind, none of them printable. How dare she reach out to me? What could she possibly have to say that I would want to hear? Another message appeared. "Michael's not who you think he is. He's not who I thought he was either. I'm not the villain in this story." Against every instinct, I found myself typing back, "Neither am I." We arranged to meet the following day at a coffee shop in a neighboring town, far from prying eyes. I told no one where I was going, not my parents, not Caroline, certainly not the children. Janet would have advised against this meeting, but something told me Ellie had information I needed. I spotted her immediately when I entered the cafe, the woman from the social media photos. Younger than me, yes, but not the 20-something. Bombshell, I'd imagined. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red much like mine had been for days. "Rachel," she said as I approached. Not a question. "Ellie," I replied, sliding into the seat across from her. An awkward silence fell between us. "What exactly was the protocol when meeting your husband's mistress?" "I didn't know he was married when it started," she said finally. "By the time I found out, I was already involved." That's supposed to make me feel better? The bitterness in my voice couldn't be contained. No, she said simply. Nothing I say will make you feel better about any of this. But I thought you should know. The truth, all of it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table to me. Michael's been stealing from his clients for years, including me. I was a client before I was anything else. I stared at the envelope without touching. Why are you telling me this? Because when I confronted him about it last week, he threatened me. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a large bruise on her forearm. Said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I regretted it. The Michael I knew, or thought I knew, would never hurt a woman. But then, the Michael I knew wouldn't have led a double life either. I'm sorry, I said, surprised to find I meant it. He had us both fooled. There are others, she said quietly. Other women, other clients he's stolen from. I know about the women, I admitted. The financial stuff, I just found out yesterday. Ellie nodded. I'm going to the authorities. I wanted to warn you first, for your kids' sake. As much as I wanted to hate this woman, I couldn't summon the energy. We were both victims of Michael's elaborate deceptions, albeit in different ways. Thank you, I said, finally taking the envelope. For whatever it's worth. As I stood to leave, she caught my hand. Rachel? He has a gun. In the city apartment. I don't know if that matters, but be careful. I left the coffee shop in a daze, Ellie's warning echoing in my mind. The Michael I married wouldn't hurt a fly. The Michael who'd threatened Ellie and hidden firearms, however, was a stranger to me. I called Janet from the car, explaining everything Ellie had told me. Her response was immediate. Come to my office, now, and call the police. Tell them everything about the threats against Ellie. By nightfall, events had spiraled beyond anything I could have imagined. Police had obtained a warrant for the secret apartment and found not only the gun Ellie mentioned, but evidence of significant financial fraud. Michael hadn't come home from work, and his phone was going straight to voicemail. I sat in my living room surrounded by my parents, Caroline, and a police officer who'd been assigned to stay with us as a precaution. The children were upstairs, ostensibly doing homework, but more likely listening to every word of the adults' hushed conversations below. We'll find him, the officer assured me. People like this, they usually head for familiar places. Does he have any hideaways? Vacation spots he favors? An image flashed in my mind. The photo of Ellie on the deck of our lake house. Yes, I said. The lake house upstate. He has keys. 2 hours later, my phone rang with news that would forever alter the course of our lives. Michael had indeed gone to the lake house. When officers arrived, he'd panicked. There had been a confrontation. Shots fired. Michael was being airlifted to the nearest trauma center. His condition was critical. In the space of a week, I'd gone from happily married mother of 2 to the wife of a fugitive fighting for his life, a man I no longer recognized, whose deceptions ran so deep I wondered if I'd ever really known him. At all. As I hung up the phone, I looked up to see Ethan and Lily standing at the bottom of the stairs, their faces pale with fear. How could I possibly explain this to them? How could I help them process what their father had done, what he had become? Mom? Lily's voice was small. Is Dad okay? I opened my arms and both children rushed into them. I don't know, sweetie, I said honestly. I don't know. Whatever happened next, whatever Michael's fate, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same. The life we'd built had been constructed on a foundation of lies, and now that foundation had crumbled entirely. As I held my children, I made a silent promise to them and to myself. We would survive this. We would rebuild. And, whatever truth still awaited discovery, we would face it together. We would face. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and despair. Ethan sat rigidly beside me, his lanky teenage frame somehow smaller in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Lily had finally fallen asleep against Caroline's shoulder after hours of silent tears. My parents hovered nearby, my father pacing while my mother clutched a rosary she hadn't used in years. 4 hours since Michael had been brought in. 4 hours with no word beyond "he's in surgery, and we're doing everything we can." I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, not even relief that he was fighting for his life rather than mine. Just a vast, echoing emptiness where 15 years of love and trust had once resided. The surgeon appeared suddenly, still in his scrubs, lines of exhaustion etched into his face. Everyone tensed, but he looked directly at me. "Mrs. Bennett, your husband survived the surgery." A collective exhale rippled through our small group. Even I felt something crack in my carefully constructed emotional armor. "He lost a significant amount of blood," the surgeon continued. "The bullet missed his heart but damaged his lung. The next 24 hours will be critical." "Can we see him?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking. The surgeon hesitated. "He's in recovery now. 2 visitors at a time, family only, and just for a few minutes." I looked at my children. Whatever Michael had done, whatever he had become, he was still their father. "You two should go first," I said. Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "You don't want to see him? Did I?" The man lying in that hospital bed was a stranger wearing my husband's face. A liar, a cheat, possibly a thief, and now, apparently, dangerous enough that police officers had felt threatened enough to shoot him. "I'll go in after you," I said, avoiding the question. As the kids followed a nurse down the corridor, the detective who'd been waiting with us approached. "Mrs. Bennett, I know this is difficult timing, but we need to ask a few more questions about your husband's financial activities." "Now?" My mother's voice rose indignantly. "Her husband just got out of surgery." "Mom, it's okay," I assured her, then turned to the detective. "What do you need to know?" "We found documents at the lake house suggesting your husband may have been planning to leave the country. Passport applications for names we don't recognize, but with his photo. Large cash withdrawals from accounts we can't trace." The implication was clear. Michael hadn't just been having affairs or embezzling funds. He'd been preparing to disappear completely. "I had no idea," I said honestly. "Until a week ago, I thought we had a normal marriage." "A good one." The detective nodded sympathetically. "We'll need access to all your financial records, anything that might help us understand how long this has been going on and who else might be involved." "Of course," I agreed. "My lawyer has copies of everything I've found so far." After he left, Caroline slid into the seat beside me. "You okay?" I laughed hollowly. "Define okay." "Fair point." She squeezed my hand. "You know, none of this is your fault, right? Isn't it, though?" The question had been haunting me. I lived with him for 15 years, slept beside him every night. How did I not see what he was becoming? "Because he didn't want you to," she said firmly. Michael was always good at compartmentalizing. Even as a kid, he could be getting in trouble at school while convincing our parents he was a perfect angel. "This is just," she trailed off. "The extreme version," I finished for her. The kids returned, both pale and shaken. Lily immediately burrowed against me while Ethan stood awkwardly nearby. "He's got all these tubes," Lily whispered. "He doesn't even look like Dad." "He woke up while we were there," Ethan added. "Asked for you." My heart stuttered. "What did you tell him?" "That you were outside." Ethan's voice hardened. "I didn't tell him you didn't want to see him." "Ethan, it's fine." He cut me off. "The nurse said we should go anyway." He got really agitated when he realized you weren't there. Guilt twisted in my stomach. Whatever Michael had done, my children loved him. They were watching how I handled this, learning from my reactions how to process betrayal and loss. "I'll go now," I said. standing before I could change my mind. The ICU was eerily quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft hiss of ventilators. I followed a nurse to Michael's bed, steeling myself for the sight of the man who had shattered our lives. Nothing could have prepared me for how small he looked amid the medical equipment, pale, intubated, with bandages covering much of his chest. This broken figure bore little resemblance to the confident man who had kissed my forehead just a week ago before leaving to meet his mistress. "He's heavily sedated," the nurse explained, "but he might be able to hear you." I nodded, waiting until she stepped away before approaching the bed. "What did you say to someone who had betrayed you so completely?" What words could possibly encompass the devastation he had caused? "The kids wanted me to come," I said finally, my voice barely audible over the machines keeping him alive. "They're scared." His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or disappointed. "I don't understand," I continued, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Was it all a lie, Michael? From the beginning? Or did you just change? When did I stop being enough?" A tear slid down his cheek, whether from pain or emotion I couldn't tell. His hand twitched on the blanket, fingers grasping weakly at nothing. Against my better judgment, I touched his hand. His fingers immediately curled around mine with surprising strength. "The police are investigating everything," I told him. "The apartment, the offshore accounts. They know about the passport applications. Were you really going to just disappear? Leave me? Leave Ethan and Lily?" His eyes opened then, clouded with pain and medication but unmistakably aware. He tried to speak around the breathing tube, resulting in a choked sound that immediately set off one of the monitors. A nurse rushed in, gently moving me aside to check his vitals. "I think that's enough for now," she said kindly but firmly. "He needs to rest." As I turned to leave, Michael's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with unexpected force. His eyes were wide, desperate. He made another strangled sound. "Sir, you need to calm down," the nurse insisted. "Your wife can come back later." His grip tightened, eyes locked on mine, pleading for something I couldn't understand. Then he released me suddenly, his hand falling limply back to the bed as his eyes rolled back. Alarms blared. The nurse hit an emergency button, shouting something about pressure dropping. More medical staff rushed in, pushing me firmly out of the room. "What's happening?" I asked, but no one answered as they closed the curtain around Michael's bed, shutting me out. I stumbled back to the waiting room in a daze, where everyone immediately bombarded me with questions I couldn't answer. "They're working on him," was all I could say. "Something happened while I was there." An hour later, the surgeon returned, his expression grave. "Mrs. Bennett, your husband has suffered a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in his lung. It's a complication we sometimes see after traumatic injuries. We've stabilized him for now, but I need to be honest with you. His condition is extremely critical." "Is he going to die?" Lily's small voice cut through the clinical explanation. The surgeon softened. "We're doing everything we can to prevent that, but I want your family to be prepared for the possibility." As the reality of the situation settled over us, my phone rang. Janet calling with news that couldn't wait. "Rachel, the police just executed a search warrant on a storage unit registered in Michael's name," she said without preamble. "They found over $2 million in cash, fake IDs for him and the children, but none for you. And documents. Rachel, they found what looks like a life insurance policy on you with a very recent purchase date." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "He was planning to kill me," I whispered. "The police want to speak with you immediately," Janet said. "They're concerned about your safety." "I'm at the hospital," I replied mechanically. "Michael just had a complication. They say he might not make it." A lengthy pause. "I hate to say this, but that might be the safest outcome for you and the children." I couldn't process her words, couldn't reconcile the man I'd married with someone capable of planning my murder. And yet the evidence was undeniable. The secret life, the hidden money, the false identities for him and our children, but not for me, the life insurance policy. Hanging up, I turned to find Ethan standing behind me, his face ashen. "Mom, what was that about fake IDs?" My heart sank. How much had he heard? How much more trauma could I pile onto my children's shoulders? "We should go home," I said instead of answering. "Dad's doctors will call if there's any change." "You're hiding something?" he accused. Just like he did. The comparison stung. "Ethan, there are things happening that I'm trying to protect you from." "I'm not a child," he exploded, drawing stairs from across the waiting room. "Stop treating me like I can't handle the truth." Before I could respond, a code blue was announced for the ICU. Medical personnel rushed past us toward Michael's room. Time seemed to stand still as we watched the frantic activity from our vantage point, helpless to do anything but wait. 20 minutes later, the surgeon approached us again, his face telling the story before he spoke. "I'm very sorry," he said. "We did everything we could." Lily collapsed against my mother, her sobs echoing through the sterile corridor. Ethan stood frozen, his earlier anger replaced by shock. My parents and Caroline immediately moved to comfort the children, leaving me standing alone, numb with a complex grief I couldn't begin to unravel. Michael was gone, the man I'd loved, the father of my children, the architect of an elaborate deception that had nearly destroyed us all. Gone. I should have felt something. Relief, perhaps. Closure. Instead, I felt only a vast, echoing emptiness. The next days passed in a blur of police interviews, funeral arrangements, and devastating revelations. The investigation into Michael's financial crimes expanded daily, revealing a pattern of fraud that stretched back nearly a decade. Clients' money siphoned into offshore accounts, elaborate shell companies, identity theft. Ellie wasn't the only woman either. There had been others, some brief affairs, others more sustained relationships. One woman in Philadelphia believed Michael was a widowed consultant named James who traveled frequently for work. Another in Boston knew him as Michael but thought he was divorced with no children. "How did he keep it all straight?" I asked Detective Martinez during one particularly grueling interview. "All the lies, all the different personas?" "Some people are just wired differently," he replied gently. "They compartmentalize. Each life is separate and distinct in their minds." "But why?" "We had a good life, enough money, beautiful children, a home." "That's something we may never know," he admitted. "But from what we've found, this wasn't about need. It was about power, control, the thrill of getting away with it." The funeral was a small, tense affair. Many who'd called themselves Michael's friends stayed away, either from embarrassment at being deceived or fear of being implicated in his crimes. The few who came seemed more interested in gleaning gossip than offering genuine condolences. I insisted on a closed casket, unable to face the man who had betrayed us so completely. As we stood at the graveside, Ethan beside me and Lily clutching my hand, I felt nothing but relief that this chapter was ending. "You okay?" Caroline whispered, as the minister concluded his generic eulogy. "No," I admitted. "But I will be. We will be." The weeks that followed brought waves of publicity as Michael's crimes became public knowledge. Reporters camped outside our home, shouting questions whenever we came or went. Former clients called daily, some sympathetic but others accusatory, as if I must have known what my husband was doing. Janet fought fiercely to protect our assets, arguing successfully that I had been as much a victim of Michael's fraud as anyone. Still, much of what we'd thought was ours was seized or frozen pending investigation. The lake house, investment accounts. Even our family home had a lien placed against it temporarily. "It's not fair," Lily cried one night as we ate dinner at Caroline's house, our own home having become a fishbowl of media attention. Why are they punishing us for what Dad did? They're not punishing us, I tried to explain. They're just trying to figure out what money was earned honestly and what wasn't. And how do we live while they figure it out? Ethan asked bitterly. It was a valid question. I'd taken extended leave from my teaching position, unable to face the whispers and stares. Our savings were rapidly dwindling. The future I'd planned, college for the kids, eventual retirement, seemed increasingly uncertain. We adapt, I said finally. We're stronger than we knew. Your father's choices don't define us. That night, as Caroline and I sat on her porch, after the kids had gone to bed, she asked the question everyone seemed to be dancing around. Do you think you ever really knew him? I considered the question carefully. Parts of him, I said eventually. The parts he wanted me to see. But the whole person? No, I don't think anyone did. You deserved better, she said simply. We all did. I thought of Ellie, of the other women Michael had deceived, of the clients whose financial futures he'd destroyed, so many lives damaged in the wake of his selfishness. 6 months after Michael's death, we finally had closure of sorts. The investigation concluded. Assets were distributed to defrauded clients, and we were allowed to keep what could be proven as legitimately ours. Substantially less than what we'd believed we had, but enough to restart our lives. We sold the family home, too full of memories and media attention to stay, found a smaller house in a different school district where the kids could start fresh without everyone knowing their story. I returned to teaching, grateful for the routine and purpose it provided. Ethan struggled the most with his father's legacy, alternating between rage and depression. Therapy helped, as did a mentorship program Caroline's husband found for him. Lily threw herself into schoolwork and ballet with a determination that both impressed and concerned me. Both children carried scars that would take years to fully heal. As for me, I went through the motions of rebuilding, one day at a time. Made lunches, graded papers, attended parent conferences and soccer games, smiled when appropriate, and cried only in private. Trusted no one except family. It was Ellie who finally broke through my carefully constructed walls. A year after Michael's death, she called me unexpectedly. I'm moving, she said without preamble. Got a job offer in Seattle. Wanted to say goodbye. We'd kept in sporadic contact, fellow survivors of Michael's deception rather than friends, but bound by a unique understanding. That's great, I said sincerely. A fresh start. That's why I'm calling, actually, she continued. I've been seeing someone. It's serious. But I'm terrified, Rachel. How do I trust again after what he did to us? The question struck a chord, deep within me. How indeed? I'd avoided even the possibility of new relationships, turning down setups from well-meaning friends and ignoring interested glances from single fathers at school functions. I don't know, I admitted. I'm not sure. I can. That's what he takes from us if we let him, she said quietly. Not just our past, but our future too. Her words stayed with me long after we hung up. Was I letting Michael win by closing myself off? By approaching everyone new with suspicion and fear? The thought was unsettling. That weekend, as I sorted through the last box of items from our old house, photographs and mementos I'd been avoiding, I found our wedding album. The smiling couple in those photos were strangers now. She, so trustingly in love. He, already harboring the capacity for deceit that would eventually destroy them. I started to close the album when a loose photo slipped out. Ethan as a toddler, balanced on Michael's shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing in genuine joy. The sight brought unexpected tears. Whatever else he was, whatever darkness lived inside him, Michael had loved our children in his way. Those moments of joy weren't necessarily lies. Perhaps that was the most difficult lesson of all, that people aren't simply good or evil, honest or deceitful. We're complex, contradictory creatures, capable of both deep love and profound betrayal. Michael had been both the man who tenderly held our newborn children and the man who plotted to leave them fatherless and me dead. I placed the photo back in the album but didn't return the album to the box. Instead, I put it on a shelf in my new bedroom, not prominently displayed, but